This is Chris Kershaw, Barnsley Football Club's programme editor, and I'm here today to interview Ian McMillan, Barnsley Football Club's poet-in-residence. Hello Ian, could you just first of all tell me a little bit about what the poet-in-residence role consists of and how it came about?
Well, I've always been a poet, and I always went to the match as a kind of escape from poetry for a bit of relaxation, but then I started to see that the poetry could become part of the football could become part of the poetry, they could be interlinked. So I thought, yes, you could write poems about going to the match. I thought I could actually become their poet-in-residence. So me and my mate were sat in the pub having a pint, and we thought, wouldn't it be a good idea to become poet-in-residence at Barnsley Football Club? So I rang up Barnsley FC and I said, look, you know me as a poet, do you fancy having me as poet-in-residence? And there was a moment's hesitation, just a moment's, and they said, all right then. And it was the easiest gig I ever got. The job consisted of me going to matches, which I do anyway, and taking notes, and writing a poem that appeared every week in the Barnsley Chronicle. And that was good because with the Barnsley Chronicle, thousands and thousands of people read it who aren't necessarily readers of poetry. So it meant it got to a real audience of real people. And there's lots of parallels between poetry and football. Poetry to me is about drama, excitement, narrative and images. And that's what you see in a football match. Also, people make a mistake in a football match and thousands of people see them do it. There's great human emotion there. There's farce, there's tragedy, and so by the end of the thing you're actually exhausted and you think there's so much here for a poem. I'll go home and write a 10-page poem about this.
How big a Barnsley fan are you?
I think I'm probably a huge Barnsley fan because I not only go to home matches, I go to away matches in my tragic scarf and my lucky hat, and then I go to reserve matches. I think you really have to be a big fan to go to reserve matches. Sitting there, it always rains at reserve matches. And I have to have a little ritual. I think you have to have a ritual before you start. And so I always have my scarf and I have to knot it in a certain way. I have to put one side across the other. I don't have a replica shirt because I think I'd look a bit silly, to be honest with you. But I do have a hat. And the hat always has to, I have to put the hat on and the Barnsley badge has to be slightly to one side. If the badge is at the front, we're not going to win. If the badge is at the back, we're going to lose heavily. If the badge is to one side, then I might do it. It's sad, but I like to do it. Now when you're a football poet, you don't just write about the players, because referees are great subjects for poems, because they're kind of in charge and they're shouting and running up and down, and this one here, he's really good. He's got a bald head, which is always good for a referee, but also he's got a fantastic expressive face, a bit like a mime artist, and I think he enjoys this. I think referees enjoy being in charge of a game. They get a bit of abuse, but they enjoy it. It's a bit like a poet enjoys being in charge of a poem.
Well done, referee!
The ref's got his card out. Oh, he loves it. He loves waving that card. He's king of the card.
Well played, referee!
Now, when I'm writing a poem, what I try and do is get down the essence of what I've seen. I try and use as well phrases that I've overheard. So a lot of the poem begins before you start to write it because you're overhearing things, you're watching things. You're not necessarily taking notes at the time. Sometimes it's staying in your head. Then I come back home and I sit at my table and I think about it. In this referee poem, I overheard somebody say, "Who's that bloke?" And I thought, that's a lovely line, "Who's that bloke?" So I was thinking about that. And then sometimes, as a writer, you get what they sometimes call inspiration, or what they sometimes call, I prefer to call it a free gift. You get a line that comes into your head. And I just thought, who's that bloke in the black with a whistle? That just came to me. What a lovely rhythm that's got. Bloke half rhymes with black, and that and whistle. I thought, that's nice. I wrote it down. Who's that bloke in the black with a whistle? And then because this is a kind of funny, daft poem about a referee, I thought, what could rhyme with whistle? And I just made a list of rhymes, and then I thought, thistle, because these referees, they often look a bit like that, like they've been sat on a thistle. So I put, who's that bloke in the black with a whistle who looks like he's been sat on a thistle? And that, I spoke that to myself. I said it to myself aloud and in my head, and it sounded nice. And that's where my poems often start, with things I see, things I hear, then I write them down. And I've written it down, so I've split it up. So it goes, who's that bloke in the black with a whistle? 3 separate lines. And that helps the reader, they see it on a page, to read it for themselves. In the second part of the poem, I'm going to change the emphasis a bit on the rhythm. I've done that first bit, who's that bloke in the black with a whistle? I want to change the rhythm a bit like you might do in a song. And I was thinking about the thing that people often shout at matches. The thing you often hear is people going, referee, referee. Often they say it twice, and it's got a lovely rhythm, that. So I'm thinking of referee, referee, and just trying to think of some rhymes like me, blokes like me, people like me, referee, referee. So that's what I'm working on now. Do you wish I was you and you were me? Printed.
Hey, how are you doing? Nice
I'm
to see
grand.
you.
Right, here's this week's masterpiece.
Excellent.
There you go.
Oh, lovely. Excellent.
Done a poem about a referee this week.
Right.
It's a common
Yeah.
topic, I think,
Absolutely, yeah. Does it rhyme?
in places.
It's in about January 1998 when Barnsley were in the Premiership. A Macedonian centre called Georgi Ristov made the error of saying in a magazine back in his hometown that Barnsley women were the ugliest in the world, the worst he'd ever seen and the fattest. And we, of course, thought this was a dreadful thing to do, for him to say. And I'd heard Ian on the radio doing a poem, and it just seemed an idea to ring him up and get his views. So we rang him, and within a few minutes he turned in this wonderful poem about Georgi Ristov and why Barnsley women were the best. So we decided it'd be a good idea during the Premiership to continue and have a football poem every week. The public like his poems, I think, because they really reflect the town. The guy he's from Barnsley, he's got this terrific Barnsley accent, and it comes over in his writing. He might use very simple words, short, 3 or 4 letter words, but throughout you can hear his voice and you can hear the authentic Barnsley voice, and in something that's only about 16 lines long. That's a tremendous achievement.
For this particular piece, the editor wanted me to do a prose introduction to the poem, because I think he thought that 35 lines of poetry might be a bit much. And it is nice to introduce a poem, make it say hello. The TV producer wanted me to write a poem about referees, and he wanted the Chronicle to publish a bit of it, and this is where you come in. On Saturday morning, I'm going to be out and about in the middle of town with a film crew, and we're going to be asking people to have a look at the extract from the poem about referees and read a bit of it out loud and say what they think about it.
Who's that bloke in the black with the whistle?
Be honest. Well, fairly honest. If you don't like it, say so, but in a very quiet voice that the microphone can hardly pick up. If you like it, say so, but in a very loud voice that almost breaks the microphone. Then you'll possibly appear on video in schools for generations.
Out will come his little book, a lick of his pencil, and your name's been took. He's waving yellow, he's waving red. I bet he takes his whistle with him when he goes to bed.
What do you think of that?
It's alright, that.
It's funny.
Ed, what do you think about that, Jack?
I think it's all right. It's very good rhyming.
Have we finished?
Who's that bloke in the black with a whistle who looks like he's been sat on a thistle? Who's that man with a cunning plan to do all the daft things he possibly can? Referee, referee, take advice from folks like me. Referee, referee, we can see things that you can't see. Who's that bloke in the black with a whistle who looks like he's been sat on a thistle? Who's that fella waves red and yellow? We'd be better off with me Auntie Bella. Referee, referee, that was never a penalty. Referee, referee, you should have booked that number 3.
He comes on the field, carrying the ball, strutting like he's 10 feet tall, and for 90 minutes he's in charge, handing out the orders, giving it large. He's like a teacher, he's the boss, and you can't say anything to him because out will come his little black book, a lick of his pencil and your name's been took. He's waving yellow, waving red, he takes his whistle with him when he goes to bed. Who's that bloke in the black with a whistle who looks like he's been sat on a thistle? Referee, referee, when the clock goes round to 5 to 3, do you wish I was you and you were me? Now, I spend a lot of my time visiting schools, encouraging people in schools to listen to poetry and perhaps more importantly, to write their own. They're quite often a bit nervous about it. They think they can't do it. Well, I think they can. And today I'm going to a school in Darlington called Carmel School. I'm working with the 9th year football squad. I know they're keen on football. I'm not sure if they're keen on poetry, but I aim to change all that. Well, I hope so anyway. My name's Ian McMillan. Do you like my shirt? No! Thank you. This morning, we're going to be writing a poem about football. And what I'm going to do is, I'm going to give you the first line free of charge. I was thinking of that phrase, it's a game of two halves, because that's what people often say about football. So, my writing's not very good, I'm afraid. So we'll have a go. There's that budgie still trapped in here. And I put it times 2, because we say it twice. So we go, it's a game of two halves. It's a game of two halves. You don't have to do it in my stupid voice if you don't want. Let's try it. It's a game of two halves. It's a game of two halves. It needs a sound after that, I think. Woo! Woo! That's good. We need a woo. That's excellent. Woo! Right, write that down. I like that. Woo! Woo! Great. Let's try it. 1, 2, 3, 4.
It's a game of two halves. It's a game of two halves.
Woo! Woo! Now that game of two halves thing, it's like one of them football cliches that people always say when they interview football after a game. What was it like? It was a game of two halves. So, what could be the next bit? Some of these things that footballers say when they get interviewed. What kind of things do they say?
At the end of the day.
That's a good one. At the end of the day. It's a game of two halves. It's a game of two halves. Woo-hoo. Woo-hoo. At the end of the day, some other things they say. Can't say that. No. This is going out on national television. No, it's at the end of the day, I tend to play. What's like, so it's about a dedicated footballer, this, who even when all practice is finished, he goes and plays. At the end of the day, I tend to play. Whatever happens after that, what's the next bit, do you think?
With me granny.
With me granny. What, the famous old footballer? That's a good one, I like that. At the end of the day, I tend to play with me granny. That's good. The granny could be the goalkeeper, yeah? She's a big granny. Yeah, she fills the goal, that's good. At the end of the day, I tend to play with me granny in goal. We need to think of a rhyme for goal, to be honest. What's a good rhyme for that?
And she dances round the pole.
She dances round the pole. That's great, that's very good. She's a dancing granny. It's the best poem ever written in the history of the universe. Bar none. It's fantastic that, but we just need one more thing. Mole. She plays good in goal. Too many goals.
She's now on the dole.
She's now on the dole.
Because I nicked all the money.
Because stole. Something's been stole. Something's been stole off her.
That's when a gloves got stole.
That's when her gloves got stolen. So it's a mystery. Grandma's gloves have been stolen. Now, stole isn't proper grammar, but it doesn't matter because it's a poem, so you don't need proper grammar. Just a proper grammar. That's fantastic. So we got, that's when her gloves got stole. So something's happened to Granny. Right, we're going to the second verse now. This is a two-verse poem. This might sound a bit silly, but I think that when you're writing poems, it's a bit like playing football. Because with poetry, you're playing with words. It's a game of two halves. You're messing about with words. Like in football, you're messing about with the ball. You're trying to get the ball to do certain things. Let's think of another cliche that footballers say.
We played against 12 men today.
That's right, we played against 12 men. And one of them was Granny. That's good.
the ball is the line, or the ball is the idea, and you're kicking the ball about, you're kicking the line about. And what's fantastic about poetry is that sometimes, just like in football, an unexpected thing happens, and you follow it down an alley, and something happens down there that you weren't ready for.
Now, when you're a football poet, you don't just have to write about the game. You can write about the stadiums like this. It doesn't have to be a fantastic stadium like this. It could be just a field with 2 posts at either end and string around it. But stadiums like this, to me, they're so exciting because they're empty, but they're full of promise. They're like cathedrals. And quite soon, this stadium's going to start filling up. People are going to start coming. There's going to be the game. When the stadium's full, then gradually it'll empty, very slowly. It's like water coming up onto a beach. It's like a tide coming in and going out. And I want to write a poem about that. There's no hint here now of the noise to come. This is rows of emptiness waiting. This is like a beach before the tide comes in. This is like a cup before it fills with tea. This is like a face before it starts to grin. This is like a stream before it rolls to the sea. Here come the people into the stands. Here comes the water across the sand. Here comes the swelling, seething crowd, laughing, shouting, excited, loud. And the game kicks off, and the waters rise, and there's a storm going on before your eyes. Waves of attacking, players surfing tackles, and the atmosphere's electric, the stadium crackles. Some players sink, and some players swim, and some could do with rowing in a well-appointed gym. But the game is the sea, and the crowd is the boat, as excitement grips you in the belly and throat. And there it goes, draining away, like light at the end of an autumn day, drifting back like an ebbing tide from packed inside to cold outside. This is like a beach when the water's gone. This is like a cup when the drink's been drained. This is like a face with no makeup on. This is like a stream after months without rain. There's no hint here now of what's just been. This is rows of emptiness, waiting.